Hey folks, welcome to our last module where there's a actual content which you have to react to. And again, I'm always telling you to keep optimistic and keep up with the pace. And before you know it, you're going to be graduating with your master's in health administration. That's been my message. I hope it's encouraging. Maybe I sound like a broken record, but either way, module 13. This is the last module for this course where you're going to actually have to do anything significant for a module. I'm sure you're currently progressing well with your end of the course projects, but in terms of module work, this is it. And it's really a good module. The module really looks at two things. It looks at professional liability insurance, and it looks at managed care, and then national care. And so these are really important topics. Really, the goal of the provider liability section is really there's four different things that we want to make sure you take away from the modules to understand about professional liability and really understand basically some of the fundamental principles around insurance. And many of you could probably write the textbook chapter based on your roles within HCSC, but also to understand what are some of the risk categories and why it's important for professionals to have liability insurance. There's some information on what are some of the elements or the conditions of an insurance policy, and then how are claims investigated and settled is also discussed. And the bulk of this is really around provider and medical liability, but it has implications also for the health plan and for health insurance, which some of you spend an awful lot of time in that space. And when you think about the purpose of insurance, really, it's fundamentally really whether it's health insurance or provider liability is really to pay out a specific amount of money if a specific event occurs and if it takes place. And insurance really has three main categories. There's coverage around property, there's coverage around personal injury, and there's coverage around legal liability. And so keep in mind that you always want to understand around an insurance policy what specifically the policy is going to cover, and again, specific. How much is the policy going to pay, and is there criteria around specific events or encounters that are covered by a insurance policy. When you talk about professional liability, it's definitely an issue that's continuing to be on the national stage around lawsuits, liability, malpractice, et cetera, has a huge impact on healthcare costs. And so it's important that people understand that you need liability, nurses need liability coverage, even volunteers within the healthcare setting need liability insurance, and even independent contractors. And then, of course, the medical liability that medical providers have to prevent themselves from being sued, and whether they're working individually, whether they're working within a healthcare institution, whether they're working on an inpatient or outpatient basis. I think the important piece for me is to always keep in mind that when you're working in a healthcare setting, you can be sued regardless or not if you even have any kind of insurance coverage. So it's really important to make sure that you're covered, that you're always following organizational policy and procedure, and that you're always practicing within the guidelines of the best practices of your particular discipline. And so that will always minimize risk. The other piece that a lot of folks don't think about is that even at the organizational level, that board members should also be thinking about and covered under a liability coverage, because there can be lawsuits that are brought against the company. The board members of that organization who are officers of the company can also be included in that litigation. That's basically chapter 21. Chapter 22 really moves into the topic then of managed care and really national coverage. And again, this is something that many of you in the class are familiar with, the topic around managed care, but really want to make sure that you understand sort of what managed care is and how managed care organizations really are responsible for coordinating, funding, overseeing, and even at times directing care. And in the past, the focus has been on, the current market has been on managed care. And now we're seeing that shift even to where managed care organizations and the principles of managed care, things like utilization review, utilization management, are really focusing more broadly now on population health and how are we taking the principles of managed care and really expanding those to build a much more population health focus. For those of you who are in the strategy and marketing course over the summer, we talked about the evolution of healthcare in the country, and the shift into population health management. And then the chapter, or the module ends really looking at the issues around the Affordability of Care Act that was signed into law in 2010 and by President Obama. A huge law that was passed, equal in scope to Medicare, which was passed in 1965. And then there was a 4-year window between March of 2010 and January of 2014 where the law was actually implemented. And I can remember that period of time within HCSC, how there were just huge resources were dedicated to preparing for the Affordability Care Act implementation. And, weekly meetings, board meetings, group meetings, strategy meetings, marketing meetings, the whole system really was shook up by the Affordability Care Act. And so today, we see that there's still lots of debate about the pros and the cons of the act. And we actually, November 10th, the Supreme Court beginning hearings on some of the issues around the Affordability of Care Act, and that's ACA, or as some call it, the Patient Protection Act, PPACA. And so you can hear it used in both ways, either ACA or the PPACA. And then there's a number of different mandates that revolved around the Affordability of Care Act. There's 10 of them, and spend some time reading those in detail. And then I've included some information that's interesting for you to review about some of the pros of the ACA, and then some of the cons of ACA, where ACA is going to go, and really look at those articles and really come up with your own opinions on how you feel the future of the Affordability of Care Act should go. And I think even though there's concern about Supreme Court changing what's in place, change takes time, and change also doesn't occur as we think it will. I think when Medicare was implemented in 1965, I think we had the same type of reaction in the country where people thought the sky was falling. Some thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And here we are with Medicare still in place and continually being debated, and efforts working at improving, with, I think, people wanting really at their core to do what's best for the American people and for the healthcare of our country. Healthcare is wrought with problems in the country. You all know that. We know that very closely by our roles within healthcare. But I'm confident that as people put their minds together and begin to listen to others and hear other sides of opinions, that we can really come up with the best solution. So I hope you enjoy this module, module 13, and module 14 occurs during Thanksgiving week. So I put a nice picture out on in Moodle, wishing all of you and your families and your loved ones a very happy Thanksgiving. And we really do have so much to be grateful for. So have a great holiday, and then we'll look forward to beginning our presentations for your final projects in Module 15. Happy Thanksgiving.